Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Evil's Whisper, Evil Saga Book 1 by Jordan Elizabeth, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. I am Dyla. I am gone. I understand now that I am forgotten. Once, the Three Kingdoms knew me well, prayed to me, even adored me, but a millennium passed and no one came to the desert to worship me. I had never helped a single soul who asked for a gift or advice. I watched, I listened, but my power was and is elsewhere. I am lost. I float over the sand, and I thank my daughter for trying to preserve my name as a goddess. She did her best, poor thing, but it isn't prayers or her love that I need. I'll be back in the world someday. I'll have what I want. Once, we were Cadian. We lived in the forest near the mountains, and we were the greatest race upon the island. The elements obeyed us. In drought, we could bring rain. In winter, we could bring sun. I had my mate, and we had our baby. We were happy. The Cadians wanted to vanquish those who preyed upon us. It was ridiculous, that wish. There is always something stronger and something weaker. If the Cadians had all stayed in the village, they would have been safe. But they wanted to move past our borders into lands already owned by others. Our powers were meant to keep us alive, to keep our crops plentiful. The Cadians turned that power into wickedness to destroy our enemies. Except they weren't enemies. Like us, they wanted to survive. Only I refused to participate in the ritual that would have destroyed all but us. Such evil thoughts to destroy others will only turn against the one wielding them. The powers turned on my people and destroyed them instead. My mate crumbled into ash as I watched. Our daughter would not meet such a fate. I had run into the ocean with her, towing the babe in a fishing boat. Such destructive power touched the land but did not reach into the water. When the Cadian were no more, save for us two, anger got the best of me. I screamed at the floating magic, and the power solidified into a sword, a weapon with enough power to destroy the world. I remember a whirring in my ears. My vision darkened. My daughter gave a cry, and the water took me into an embrace. No longer did I feel the cold, nor my anger. There was nothing. I was gone. The wandering spirits of my continent took me in, another lost soul like them. How kind of them. I was alone, able to watch and not act how I wanted to act. That sword had to be locked away. It had too much power. I digress. You wonder about my daughter. Did I watch her meet my fate? No, she survived, and as a Cadian, she will live forever until an outside force acts upon her life. A quick stab, an illness, a slip from a tree branch. Those animals of the continent that my people so hated took her in, and they called her Water, after that which had saved her from her own destruction. She became beautiful and wise, and they told her about me and how the humans came. They fled some evil in their own land, that matters not, and they decided to make my continent their home. The humans mated my precious daughter to their chief. I loathed them for it, but Water was happy. She bore 3 daughters. Strong Usanoya, who had the bull-headedness of humanity. Beautiful Saya with her Cadian selfishness. Kind Amalita, who exuded grace and righteousness. All 3 of my daughter's children had my powers, and the humans made them their leaders. 3 women became 3 queens, with kingdoms that chose to war with each other. That is when everyone forgot about me. Our land is divided into 3 countries now, each named after one of my daughters. The kingdom of Saya wants to ruin Amalita. Amalita, in turn, wants to see Saya obliterated. Usania is the neutral country at war with none, but not at peace either. I digress now. I admit I dwelled too much upon the sword. I wanted it. I needed it. Such evil cannot be free. Time pitied me. Time took me to its realm where all is all and nothing is nothing. The sword is made of Cadian hatred, yes, but there is more hatred in the world. There is darkness, and darkness is just as powerful and just as evil. The daughter of darkness will be born someday, and she will destroy the world. The daughter of light will be her counterpart, and bring forth life where there is none, happiness where there is only sadness. Time gave me the ability to tell my child, and she told hers, and they did not want to ready their armies as time wanted. Saya, my selfish granddaughter, wants that darkness for herself. The kingdom of Saya would take the daughter of darkness for their own gain. Saya will not get it. The daughter of darkness will be destroyed as she breathes her first breath. I will see to that. First chapter. Sabius speaks. I had planned to escape in order to look in a mirror and smile at the girl I saw. Everything I owned would be mine and not my father's. It's the kind of happiness I've waited for my entire life. I'll never get it now. The outlaw had grabbed my arm. He threw me over the saddle and put his filthy hand over my mouth. I can still taste it, all that sweat and dirt, the sand. He had hit me across the cheek and told me to shut up. I was too scared to try to get off the horse. He brought me here. The outlaws called me names. Mangy mongrel, city whore, and spit on me. I was supposed to escape from my captivity, not find a different one. The outlaw shoved Sabia into the sand. A rock scraped her arm, the pain of fast prick, and as she gasped, he grabbed the back of her vest and twisted her around. The head wrap slipped down her back. Her heart pounded, breath rasping. She could do nothing against a grown man thrice her size. He was going to rape her or kill her, or both. This would be the end. Please, she licked her dry lips. Let me go home. My father will reward you. She stumbled over the words. Waiting for his reply, her heart pounded against her ribcage, breath rasping. She prayed the idea of a lucrative ransom would have the outlaws reevaluating their prisoner. It should have only been a 3-day hike through the desert, sleeping during the sun hours and walking at night before reaching the forest where salvation stretched into her future. She would find a home, and the occupants would take her in as a maid. She would be free from her father. No one would call her worthless ever again. Her plan had hit a perilous snag. She wasn't supposed to be captured within an hour of leaving Juniper City. Maybe her father was right. She was worthless. Nothing she did turned out right. Campfires burned between the tents of the outlaw encampment. She crawled backward until she bumped into the nearest structure. Her feet tangled in her skirt. She couldn't fight, but could she run? The men would have to be distracted. She'd never run in her life unless darting through the halls with her little sisters counted. Her leg muscles already ached from riding horseback. A sharp pain crept up her back. These men would be more used to rigorous exercise. She would end up on her face. Worthless. The outlaws pawed through the spoils in their saddlebags, including her bag of belongings. One of them lifted her spare breast coverlet and rubbed it against his loincloth. Lewd, filthy men. Her cheeks burned. Give that back! She shouldn't have spoken. Men talked, women listened. They'd cut out her tongue for her outburst. Sabia pressed her lips shut and lowered her gaze to the sand. I am demure. Move past me. Ignore me. Pretty thing got something to say? He crouched in front of her and laughed as he trailed his finger over her cheek. She jerked her head away, and he let his digit slide down her neck and between her breasts. The first man to call her pretty had to be a disgusting bore. She clamped her teeth to avoid vomiting, screaming, or scratching the eyes from his big bald head. He straightened, tossing the scrap of silk at her. It brushed her cheek and shoulder, a contrast to his foul touch. No one should touch her in such an intimate way except her husband. Would a husband even want her disgraced self now? Not that a man had ever wanted her before. Sabia almost laughed. She would never escape from the outlaws. No longer did she have to worry about finding a husband. Her father would be overjoyed not to lose sleep over a dowry. Sabia couldn't surrender to hopelessness. She had to keep plotting escape. If she surrendered to the outlaws, nothing, would ever be accomplished. Horses neighed from the distance, and the ground vibrated as more outlaws solidified from the night. She would never be able to escape with all of them surrounding her. Panic rose to burn her throat. No, she had to maintain hope. There might be one villain she could befriend. He might help her get away. An outlaw pushed a young man off the front of his horse. He stumbled in the sand before riding and gaped at her. She had to look a mess, her headscarf half off and sand in her hair, the breast coverlet on her shoulder. If she could make him think her pretty, he might be more willing to aid her. How did the girls in the city do it? Sabiyah batted her eyelashes, but her eyes stung with unshed tears. What else did they do? She pursed her lips. The dry skin tugged across her lower lip and blood seeped into her mouth. She fought down a gag. What if he did find her pretty and tried to have his way with her? His hands would touch her body, her virgin body. Survival mattered. She would have to accept that over purity. He couldn't be that horrid of an outlaw. His skin was too smooth with youth. No stubble marred his dark flesh. His eyes glowed in the firelight. "Help me," she mouthed. The outlaw jumped down from behind the boy and shoved him toward her. He turned to glare at the older man, revealing his wrists were bound. Panic burned again. He was as much a prisoner as she was, no help for her there. Half of her brain reminded her that if the daughter of darkness willed her dead, so be it. The other half screamed at her to keep plotting. "My brother will kill all of you," the boy yelled, and his voice squeaked, balanced on the precipice between childhood and manhood. The outlaws laughed, and the one holding the boy kicked him down. He slid in the sand near where she knelt. When he lifted his face, the tears on his cheeks streaked through the sand that mottled his skin, moisture reflecting the campfire light. He had to feel as helpless as she did. The innocence in his face brought her youngest sister to mind. Her hands tingled to reach out for him, to hug him. They would succeed together. "We'll be fine," sand gritted in her teeth. "The daughter of darkness will save us." Her sister would have asked for a story, something to distract from their plight, but the boy kept gaping at her. Sabiyah had to fill him with the hope so he wouldn't give up. The men continued to paw through their spoils, the new arrivals tossing down more, and a few men left the nearest tent with tankards to join in. "I don't believe in her," the young man spit to the side. "The daughter of darkness can rot in the underworld." Sabiyah jerked back. "You jest. If the daughter of darkness heard him, it would be a curse upon his head, upon both their heads, considering her luck in reaching the forest for a happy new life." The boy stared at her so she wet her lips, her cheeks hot beneath his stare. "Just because of where we are now doesn't mean she won't bring us salvation." Sabiyah had to believe that, too. The daughter had given her the chance to escape Juniper City, and she could bring a second escape now. Right? The daughter of darkness wouldn't have allowed her to leave the city at all if the Savior truly believed Sabiyah to be worthless. He rolled onto his back, and his chest rose beneath his leather vest. If Sabiyah panicked, it would feed into his emotions. She had to keep them both calm. She drew a deep breath and exhaled. "The daughter of darkness loves us so long as we give her our love." "I've got bigger things to worry about." He wiggled to sit up without using his tied hands. "Name's Herrick." They needed to stay calm and focused. Panicking would get them killed faster. She inhaled and exhaled again. Her heartbeat still thudded, and the corners of her vision blurred. No panicking. "My brother will come save us." Herrick squirmed closer to her and leaned against the tent at her back. "What's your name?" Her father would beat her if he knew she was so close to a strange boy. He would do worse if he knew she spoke to that boy. Herrick looked to be around her age, 15, marriageable, no longer innocent with childhood. Marriageable, but not to her. No man wanted her for his wife. She and the boy could escape from the outlaw camp, but they needed to work together. They needed calmness and camaraderie. The structures of city life could rot. "I'm Sabiyah." Her teeth chattered from fear. "Shut up." An outlaw tossed his tankard at them, and ale drenched her legs, the liquid cold and the night chill. Sabia shrank deeper into the tent at her back. She would not tremble before them. She would never beg for mercy, even if they plunged a knife into her chest. If her father's beatings had taught her nothing else, it was how to keep her mouth shut in the face of pain. "Get up, bitch!" An outlaw grabbed her arm and hauled her to her feet. She glanced back at Herrick before the outlaw slapped her. She bit her tongue, tasting blood. The daughter of darkness would save them. She had to. Matthias stood in his stirrups while he stroked his horse's neck. The velvet over-tight muscles helped to calm his nerves. "Soon enough you're going to see me bawling Herrick out." Sand Dancer turned his head to nicker, hot breath brushing past Euthias's cheeks. Maybe the animal wanted to turn berating Herrick too. A desert wolf howled, echoed by another farther off, their cries mingling with the wailings of the dead. A shiver crept across his skin. Some day, Euthias's soul might be led to the sand dunes to mourn with the rest of them. He would never be at peace with his family if that happened. He would never know peace at all. Whatever the future brought him, so be it. He could do his best to fight for a good one, though. The outlaw camp lay a mile ahead, marked by firelight. He swung off the saddle, and a cloud of sand billowed around his knee-high leather boots. Drunken laughter and faint music drifted across the desert. Euthias dismounted and took off at a run, leaving Sand Dancer behind a dune. He would be fast and strong, like a steed. Euthias paused as a cry sounded, mournful and throaty. A girl's sobs carried on the wind. No time to worry about souls that couldn't be saved. He had to focus on the main mission. His father's words teased his memory. "Only do what you can and give no more than a passing thought to that which you cannot change." The full moon illuminated the outlaw camp. The night could have been worse. It could have been dark as evil and windy with a storm. 5 men surrounded the nearest campfire, each holding an iron mug. Euthias paused behind the first tent, where the light silhouetted a man vomiting inside, splashes of food hitting sand, followed the guttural gag. Euthias forced his stomach not to retch as well. Nausea wouldn't help his sneak attack. He continued between another row of tents to a different campfire, where a young woman danced around burning logs, light flickering off her pale skin. Sand slid over her toes as she kicked and spun. "Get moving, gal! Dance faster!" one of the outlaws bellowed, and another guffawed. Her skirt of faded blue silk twirled around her legs in a blur. She seemed no older than an adolescent, her body little more than skin over bones. Something about her reminded him of Herrick, the helplessness, perhaps. She tripped over the long skirt and fell to her knees, crying out. The man nearest her kicked her with his sandal to knock her onto her back. She clutched her ribs where she'd been struck and rolled toward the fire. Euthias had no time to save her from the camp, even though his muscles ached to grab her away. He steeled his mind to banish the image of her bleeding knees and eyes that had glazed over with pain. She would have to survive on her own until he could return another night, if there would be another night. The elders of his village wouldn't want him to waste the energy on someone already lost. Prisoners of outlaws didn't last long. His people would find their corpses out in the dunes, twisted and mangled, sometimes more blood and wounds than body. The Scion King had an army he could send to eradicate the villains, but he chose to ignore the desert, and Euthias's people were few. Familiar anger brought hot saliva to his mouth. He closed his eyes to calm himself. It wasn't time to lose control. The king would never change his ways. Euthias ran to the next row of tents covered with blood-encrusted animal hides and imported gingham faded from the desert sun. He dropped to his chest and crawled to the first large tent to lift the sidewall, peering underneath where colorful silk obscured his sight. Not this one. Prisoners wouldn't be kept in a tent lined with such wealth. A man wouldn't want guts staining something so fancy. From the next tent came slurred laughter and the clanking of iron mugs. A boy's scream carried over the noise. Euthias paused to peek under the material. That one. His father did care about this particular prisoner. Euthias shoved inside with his fists clenched, his brown leather gloves stretching across his knuckles. He didn't have to contain himself now. A chuckle crept up his throat. The hot air reeked of liquor and sweat. Bulky, perspiring bodies blocked his way. Euthias elbowed them aside and marched to a wooden pole stained with blood, erected in the center of the tent with a boy lashed to it. Cuts streaked his legs and back, and a knife wound glistened on his cheek. In better light, they were bound to look more grotesque. Anger seared hotter through Euthias's bones. Behind the boy lay the crumpled mass of another man, lifeless. Euthias peeled back his lips in a snarl. If he ever met the king, he'd toss him to the outlaws and see how he endured being their captive. "Hey," someone grabbed Euthias's arm. "Who're you?" Euthias shoved him off. The torturer led the whip's metal tip a slice across the young man's back to form another cut in the boy's leather vest. He yelped, writhing against the pole as if it would shelter him. From one of the tent's corners, a girl screamed. "Hit him again!" a drunk slurred. As the torturer pulled back the whip, chortling, Euthias slammed his hand into the son of a bitch's jaw. He smacked the end of his palm into the man's nose, snapping it. Blood dribbled toward the torturer's upper lip, and he hollered. "Good. Squeal like a pig at slaughter." "Euthias!" His brother's face twisted as he attempted to turn. A smile touched Euthias's lips before he fought it down. "What the stars was that?" someone yelled from deeper in the tent. One of the outlaws swung an iron mug at Euthias, but he grabbed the man's wrist and forced him to the ground. The man shrieked. How did they like pain? Grunting, Euthias kneed him in the face before shoving the bastard away. "That's for trying to kill my brother." Euthias wiped his hand across his leggings. If the outlaws didn't value life, he wouldn't value theirs. He crossed to his brother, drew a boot dagger, and cut the splinter-ridden rope binding Herrick's wrists. Herrick sagged against Euthias's chest. "Thank the stars you came." A million retorts flashed through Euthias's mind. They led with, "I wouldn't have had to come at all if you'd stayed away from danger zones." "Hey," one of the drunks yelled. "What you think you're doing?" The man charged Euthias as they drew notched sabers. Euthias bit back a laugh and replaced his dagger for his sword. With a swing, he cut two men through their stomachs and charged the next. Euthias called over his shoulder to get his brother. "Herrick, run!" Euthias snatched the whip lying by the man with the broken nose and slashed it across the two nearest outlaws. "Let it be known the killer shows no mercy when his family is in danger." A few of the outlaws paused at the use of his title, and a new stench added to the liquor and sweat. Fear. Good. Let them pee their loincloths over him. If they wanted stories of his murderous rampages, mostly fabricated by city gossips, he'd be delighted to regale them. The two outlaws he'd attacked yelped and staggered, hands rising to their cut faces as blood sprayed into the air. Euthias took out 6 more before a space cleared. He threw the whip into the crowd and grabbed Herrick by the arm, dashing for the exit. "We can't leave." Herrick pulled back as they reached the night air. "For the sake of the Queen, we're leaving now." Leave it to his brother to botch a rescue. They'd gotten that far, but it didn't mean they were safe. Life with Herrick was never safe. "Euthias, we can't. They took a girl from the desert city. She's scared, and..." Euthias ducked behind a tent, shoving his brother down. As bandits ran into the night away from them, as if they were monkeys after a morsel, Euthias allowed Herrick to lift his face from the sand. Herrick spat the grains off his lips. "The girl!" "Quiet," Euthias snapped. "Do you want to call a band of outlaws down on both our heads?" "You already did that," Herrick whispered. Euthias swore under his breath. "The dancer with the blue skirt?" "No, they're keeping her in there." His brother's hands shook as he pointed. "They're going to kill her in the morning and send her head back to the city on a spear." "You have to save her. I promised her you would." His voice rose to a shrill cry. Euthias slapped his hand over his brother's mouth. Euthias had heard a female scream during the brawl. It was a rescue mission for his brother, not a death escapade. Their father's teachings forbade such a maneuver. Still, something within himself tugged him back toward the tent. Bollocks. If I cannot find her within a moment's time, she's not getting saved. Do you understand? Yes, Herrick mumbled against the gritty palm.